Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Fell in Love with His Sensei Femme Kakashi Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Naruto stepped out of the Hokage's office and decided to try the Junin lounge first. He had heard from Asuma that Kakashi had been spending a lot of time there, recuperating. The wounds she sustained prevented her from doing any heavy workload for the village until they fully healed, which had relegated her to mainly looking over paperwork. Even if the medical ninja looked over her thoroughly, Naruto was still concerned there were lasting effects. That was why he was glad the Hokage had assigned him to Team 7 and Kakashi. It would put him in a better position to keep an eye on her. If there was something he could do to help, he would do it. As he walked the halls of the Hokage's complex, Naruto watched many ninja bustle between destinations with stacks of paperwork. The few who could see him past what they were carrying nodded in greeting or smiled. A few Genin Academy students even bowed in respect. No one had ever treated Naruto badly, as few knew about his status as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, but those reactions were not what he was used to. I guess wearing a flak vest is more than just a choice in clothing, it puts you at a different level. He continued to be acknowledged until he arrived at the lounge. Although the name stated it was for high-level shinobi only, the Junin lounge was open to Chunins as well. That was why Naruto only hesitated a moment before entering. The room itself was not spectacular by any means. Inside were couches and booths of chairs built into small depressions in the floor. Windows took up most of the opposite wall to give everyone something to look at, although Naruto wondered if it had tactical value as well. A few cabinets were available to store food or utensils, but they did not see much use. Its main purpose was to function as a gathering point for Junin whenever the Hokage called a meeting. Very few were inside now, considering the busy jobs the Hokage already had handed out. The Junin Naruto was looking for was not there unfortunately, but someone else he knew was. Naruto recognized Kurenai sitting in one of the booths, so he went over to her. Hopefully she had seen Kakashi. She smiled as he approached, glad to see a familiar face and in such a nice uniform. Naruto, it's good to see you. That vest looks like it was made for you to wear. He grinned. Kurenai was always so nice to him. If it wasn't for her support, he wasn't sure he could be the person he was today. That was why he made it a point to be just as nice to her and help her whenever she needed it. Thanks, Kurenai. Do you mind if I just call you that? Sensei just seems so impersonal. Even before his promotion, Naruto had difficulty trying to pick the proper title to give to Asuma and Kurenai. Though they both had taught him techniques as well as served as a teacher figure, that relationship was superseded by them being his older siblings. Kurenai, not one to make a big fuss over such things, waved him off with a small laugh. That he was even concerned about giving her an honorific tickled her. Don't worry, Naruto, you can call me whatever you like. Just remember to act properly when you're around superiors. Even though she didn't mind, other Junin or the Hokage might, depending on the situation. With that out of the way, Naruto broached his main question. Have you seen Kakashi anywhere, Kurenai? I thought she might be here, but I guess I was wrong. An interested look appeared on Kurenai's visage as he asked the question. Naruto has been quite attached to Kakashi since that mission. I wonder what happened between those two. Rumors traveled fast about what happened during the mission, mostly from certain Team 7 genin bragging about it. Most considered them false until proven by Kakashi, but she had been unsurprisingly tight-lipped about the matter. Kurenai had not wanted to interfere with neither hers or Naruto's personal life, so she didn't bother to ask, but it was still interesting. Perhaps Asuma wasn't as far off in his teasing as she thought. Fortunately, she had information the blonde wanted to hear. Why, yes, I have. Guy was just in and forced her away to train with him. Apparently he challenged her to something again. Naruto was understandably confused. Kurenai struggled to find a proper term to describe Guy, in a way to sum everything up. In the end, she had to settle with just describing his personality, as she refused to use the term youthful, as he most assuredly would have preferred. Guy is a fellow Junin and childhood friend of Kakashi's, as well as her self-proclaimed rival. Whenever he gets the chance, he always challenges her to something outrageous to see which one of them is better at it. He is a bit too eccentric for his own good, and with Kakashi still healing, I hope he doesn't make her overdo it. That was enough for Naruto to know. There was no way he was going to let this guy force Kakashi into doing something she probably didn't even want to do. Thanks Kurenai, I'll go check the training grounds. Hopefully I can save her before something terrible happens. The young woman watched Naruto leave, amused by the pressure he put on himself to rescue Kakashi. Maybe it really was just her imagination, but things were getting interesting between those two. Naruto wasn't able to get far before he ran into his first obstacle. There were definite positives to having the Hokage's office and the Junin lounge all in the same place, but the academy was a different story. If he didn't want to deal with another assassination attempt from Konohamaru, he had to avoid the area entirely. Unfortunately, the thought of Kakashi hurting herself training was enough to make Naruto forget which part of the building he was running through. Soon enough, Konohamaru and his friends came into view before they were quickly pushed out of the way by the much larger Chunin. Even as an academy student, the Hokage's grandson had a great ego and was not about to take getting pushed down from anyone, not even his uncle. When he saw it was Naruto, it only seemed to make him angrier. Watch where are goin', will ya? Wait, Uncle Naruto. Naruto turned around to see who he had pushed past and turned a bit white when he realized who it was. Things were about to get ugly. Konohama, I've got you now. Get him, Moegi, Udon. His two friends in the academy were hesitant to follow orders, but were quickly reminded who Konohamaru's grandfather was. That got them to run after Naruto, with Konohamaru leading the pack, intent on taking Naruto down and claiming the title of Chunin for their own. They tackled the Chunin all at once in an attempt to bring him to the ground. When they all comically fell through the blonde's chest, they looked to see the simple clone disappear. As Konohamaru cursed Naruto and his ability in E-rank ninjutsu, the real one was already halfway to the training grounds. Real or fake attempts on his life, Naruto didn't even flinch. Konohagakure. Training grounds. Come on Kakashi, this is the ultimate test of faith between you and your youthful students. At least try to play along. There will be no competition. You are just making a fool of yourself, Guy. Oh no you don't Kakashi, last time you tried to warn me about making a fool of myself, I almost lost the competition. Not this time. Naruto came across an interesting sight when he arrived at the training ground. In front of him there were two of Kakashi, identical in almost every way. One of them seemed to be shouting something about burning youth while the other stood there with hands in pocket, completely calm. When they realized he was standing there, they immediately stopped bickering. The one which had been so passionate a moment before did their best to mimic Kakashi's laid-back pose. Though they were able to keep their hands in the pant pockets, that Kakashi was unable to pull off the uninterested look Naruto had gotten so used to seeing. Hello Naruto-kun, I hope you are ready for some grade A training today. It will be most hip. The clear imposter said with a thumbs up and barely hidden smile. Naruto looked at her for a moment, turned, and then addressed the normal Kakashi as he would usually. Kakashi-sensei, are you sure you are alright with training so soon after our mission? She gave him an iconic eye smile and nodded, completely ignoring the devastated guy to her right. I feel better now Naruto, thanks for the concern. I'm glad to hear that, it means we can start training together sooner. Oh, quite eager aren't you? Their conversation was cut off by an irate guy who had since transformed back and had been trying to get their attention by flailing his arms madly. Unfortunately, Kakashi's previously mentioned coolness prevented her from hearing him, and it seemed her student shared the sentiment. Hey, Kakashi, what the heck was that performance? Kakashi turned to her overzealous friend with a bored expression and, in the most matter-of-fact tone, spoke. Oh right, the competition. Guess you lost. Guy was unable to form words in response, preferring instead to quietly dismiss himself. It seemed Kakashi racked up another victory. He would have to try even harder the next time. He would learn the ways of Kakashi's cool and then she would have no choice but to accept Guy's feelings. Poor Guy, she just was not interested. With her full attention back to Naruto, Kakashi could finally update him on what the Hokage had no doubt told him by now. Out of respect for the Hokage as well as her sensei, she felt obligated to look out for Naruto's well-being and teach him whatever she could. That meant that he would need to have an excuse to be with her, for her to lead by example. With the Hokage's help, she was able to arrange that. Hopefully Naruto didn't mind much. The Hokage has no doubt told you that you are now partnered with Team 7 and I. Don't think of it as much of a punishment but learning experience. Naruto could barely hold back his excitement, there was no way he could see that as punishment. I see a lot of my younger self in you Naruto, so I'd like to help you if I can. What all this means is that we will be spending more time together, you don't mind right? I don't mind at all, Kakashi-sensei. They shared a smile before Kakashi led him into the open training ground. It was a beautiful day that would be a shame to waste. That meant the two would start early by training today, without the rest of the team. Alright Naruto, I've already gone over your profile the Hokage gave me. From what I can tell, your experiences with Asuma and Kurenai gave you a well-rounded balance in your taijutsu, ninjutsu, and genjutsu. Does that sound about right? Naruto was doing a few light stretches to get ready for whatever Kakashi was going to throw at him. He nodded in agreement, the training those two had given him really did help. My job isn't to build on what you have already learned from Asuma-san and Kurenai-san, it would only hinder your growth. I'm going to be teaching you new techniques that can be used in conjunction with what you already know. That made enough sense to Naruto and it also sounded a lot more interesting. So, what's first? First, we elaborate on your wind affinity. Do you know anything about it Naruto? Other than of course, you can create wind chakra. Naruto only knew what he remembered from Academy and from what Asuma told him when they first discovered the affinity. Well, I know that it is strong against Raiden techniques, like yours. It is also weak against Kaden techniques, but can be used to enhance them if the user knows both. Kakashi smiled, he had the simple definition figured out. That is correct, futon techniques are also well known for enhancing a weapon's length and power. But the technique I am going to teach you goes along with what you already know, enhancing Kaden with futon chakra. Naruto was intrigued, but he didn't know how to mold Kaden chakra. Perhaps that was what Kakashi would teach him. Kakashi started teaching him the basic hand signs of the technique as she continued to speak. Remember Naruto, with enough practice you can master any element. Something like that can take years though, so it is better to focus on something complementary to what you already know. That is why Asuma-san knows both Kaden and futon techniques, because they work so well together. The hand signs weren't difficult to learn as Naruto had seen them done before. Kakashi was teaching him a common fireball technique that many of the village's shinobi already employed. It was something even Naruto had yet to learn though, so he paid close attention as she described the proper way to handle fire chakra in the body. You will feel the heat build in your stomach and come up your esophagus, release it with a gust of air from your lungs. That is how many fire techniques, basic or complex, are formed. That was when Kakashi left the rest in Naruto's hands, as she knew the best way to learn was from personal experience. It took him most of the rest of their time together, but Naruto's fireball technique was growing larger each time he committed to it. She was amazed by the amount of chakra he had to continue training for hours, but considering the fox, it wasn't so unbelievable. Well done, Naruto-kun. Next time we will see what effects it has with a futon technique. Remember, we have a practice with the rest of the team tomorrow at noon. Kakashi dismissed him and went her own way back home, as the sun was setting. Naruto just watched her leave before turning for home himself. He immediately ran into Asuma, whom had caught onto their training session and had been watching from the sidelines. They seemed to work together well, as if it was natural. Naruto hung off her every word and Kakashi knew how to manipulate that positively. Well, good to see you finally making some progress. I thought you two would never part. His teasing didn't affect Naruto as much this time, as their reason of being together was because of the Hokage himself. What are you doing here, Asuma? Naruto asked, neutral. Asuma smiled. Him putting up that tough act only made it more fun. For now, though he would put away the jokes, there was serious business afoot after all. I caught Kurenai in the lounge and found out you were looking for Kakashi. Since I wanted to get some work done with your taijutsu training, I thought I'd try and find you. Of course, you two would stay inseparable until the end of the day. He said in a mock accusing tone, as if it was Naruto's fault. With the next joke, Naruto deadpanned. Does Kakashi know about this running gag? Of course she does. Her hearing is better than you think. That wasn't a satisfactory answer, but Naruto knew there was no getting through to him. Alright, then if you really do want to train me now, let's figure out a time to meet tomorrow. Naruto suggested. Still skeptical Asuma had any time to spare from his team. I was just thinking about that. How about we knock two birds with one stone? We train the hour before you are supposed to meet up with Kakashi and you can impress her by showing off your skills. As long as you can learn fast enough, that is. Sensing a challenge, Naruto was up for it. If you can get up that early, then so can I. Let's do this. The two brothers set out for home, both very sure the other would be experiencing a taste of humiliation the next time they fought. Training grounds. Naruto and Asuma were both up before their allotted training hour, preparing themselves. Asuma had the obvious advantage. Naruto may have watched him use the blades, but the forms and stance eluded him. It would be fair, however, because Asuma would give his younger brother a crash course before smoking him into dust. They left together, without a word. Both wore confident grins that they would be victorious. Neither of them really remembered what started the competition, only knowing that they would not concede. Asuma and Naruto arrived at the training grounds a little late, but made up for it with determination. They both took out their chakra blades and, with Asuma leading, went through the stance as well as the common forms of Hine. These would be what Naruto would use the most often in combat. Remember to go with the wind, not against it. Your movements should be powerful but graceful, quick to react. Against anything larger than a kunai, use both blades to block unless you want a chunk taken out of you. They are durable, but they don't have that good of defense. You can slice your opponent along the entire length of the blade, but remember you will have the most power behind the thinner part. That is also where you will want to extend your wind chakra. Naruto went through the paces of each form a few times. At times he felt like some sort of taijutsu boxer, others he felt like a legitimate swordsman. Up until that point he had been holding back using his chakra to extend the blade, to save energy, but now was Naruto's turn to try. Okay Asuma, I think I have the basic forms down. Now tell me how to shape my chakra around it. Asuma had been watching Naruto and felt like he was ready to step it up to the next level. After all, if he didn't learn how to use a chakra blade effectively, he wouldn't stand a chance in one-on-one. Take a careful look at your blade and memorize the shape of it. The hardest part of shape manipulation is getting your chakra to properly take on the shape you want. To start with, focus your chakra around the lower tip of the blade, wrapping it around to form a point that extends from the physical edge. Naruto held up his left arm so that the blade was level. He began to feed chakra into the blade, a bit too much at first. Blue energy enveloped the blade for a moment, but Naruto got it under control. As he focused the chakra around the lower edge, It began to turn blue-white as the chakra became wind itself. A low whipping sound could be heard, as if a storm was brewing. It was shaky, but Naruto was holding the chakra's shape around his blade. To experiment the durability, he swung it around a few times. The pressure to hold it in place wasn't as bad. As he began to envelope the rest of the weapon in chakra, Asuma watched on. Naruto was constantly putting too much or too little chakra into the blade or lost his concentration, but he kept at it. With that kind of rate, he might have had a higher endurance than even Asuma. Alright Naruto, enough messing around. I've shown you the basics, but for the advanced stuff you are going to have to fight me. Naruto looked at his hands, flexing the muscles that the blades used. Yes, it was tricky, but he could do it. Asuma would have the advantage, but not for long. Are you sure you can handle this? Asuma smirked, willing to take that challenge. He brought up his own trench knives and got into the standard form, arms up and legs ready to pounce. Naruto mimicked his brother, already funneling wind chakra to his blades. It wasn't enough to be seen, but it was enough to make an impact. So that is his plan. Asuma had gotten used to hearing wind chakra with his own extensive use of it, and he knew the trick Naruto was trying for. For now, he decided to play along. Being the younger and more aggressive, Naruto launched forward to start the battle. Their blades clashed and sparks flew as Naruto's chakra around his blades intensified. That forced Asuma back, unable to resist the ferocity of the attack. Naruto's blade turned from dagger to something akin to a buzz saw. The wind tore at the bit to grab a hold of the Junin. Damn, Naruto isn't backing down from this one. Asuma funneled his own chakra, elongating his weapon blades with wind. They clashed again, evenly matched for the first few moments. As Naruto was pushed back by Asuma's raw strength, they fell into the taijutsu side of Hien. Fists flung and blades clashed as they weaved in and out of attacks before trying to weave a horizontal or vertical slice. Neither could get through, but the wind chakra was getting its tribute. The whipping wind started scratch and scrape their arms and hands that were soon covered in blood. You can't win like this, Naruto. You are too obvious. Asuma blocked another strike and, with a previously measured calculation, swung his chakra out for a strike at Naruto's abdomen. And you are too careful, you won't get through with that speed. Naruto's body betrayed his fervor as it shook, blocking the attack. Their duel only got louder and louder until it started to attract visitors. Neither of them noticed as four familiar faces emerged from an adjacent training ground. As it turned out, Kakashi had gathered her squad earlier than she told Naruto. She wanted to talk with them and get some individual training done before Naruto took over her priorities. That said, she was surprised to see the blonde not only up early and training but fiercely fighting against Asuma with wind chakra. Holy! Before Arata loudly announced their presence, Sakura placed a hand over his mouth and punched him in the head. None would admit it, but they were entranced by the sights and sounds of pure chakra slamming into itself. Naruto and Asuma retreated from one another, gaining distance. With one last effort they both leapt forward with their weapons ready. They slammed into each other with enough force to crack the earth beneath their feet. It's over. Naruto. Give up already. Asuma again pushed Naruto to the limit, forcing him back. Guess I will have to try something crazy. Naruto thought regretfully as he would have liked to win with raw strength. This is something I learned from Kakashi Sensei. Without going through hand signs, Naruto created a small stream of flame from his mouth and ignited the wind chakra. It launched forward and enveloped Asuma in a raging fireball. That gave Naruto the chance he needed to retreat when he realized Asuma replaced himself with a log. Kakashi was amazed Naruto was even able to wield those blades, let alone use Kaden in such a situation. Just one training session from her and the blonde had already figured out how to apply it to another technique he just recently learned. Well done, Naruto. Asuma sat in a tree branch just above Kakashi's squad, his grin filled with pride. That was when Naruto finally realized he had an audience and was unsure of what to do or say. He looked like a wild man, his breath hoarse and his arms torn up. When the genin applauded and Kakashi just smiled a knowing smile, he knew he had won. The rest of the training with Team 7 went well, but it was nowhere near eventful as the Heen fight. Not even Arata and his ego could find a way to find fault in Naruto's performance, not when Kakashi couldn't. For now, he had that victory. A week later, Konohagakure Ninja Academy. It was finally time for the much-anticipated Chunin exams. Though the genin were surely fretting it, Naruto had no such problems. He was on his way to the Ninja Academy now to meet up with the Junin. For now his orders were to attend each event with the squad leaders, basically to remain on standby. Fine by me, I guess. Naruto landed in the courtyard of the academy. He noticed quickly that most of the genin had already gone inside to take the test. From what he heard, it was some sort of written exam, but if he could find Kakashi or Kurenai, they might be able to tell him more. Before he could even walk in the door, he was collected by Kurenai. She had already been inside to see Team 8 off and so was headed back to the lounge. The other Junin had been aware of Naruto's orders and so were on the lookout to bring him along should they find him. Kurenai was glad to find him first. Hello Naruto-kun, ready for the Chunin exams? Naruto wasn't noticing anything significant yet, so he shrugged. Can't say I am Kurenai-chan. Nothing seems different, I guess. Kurenai smiled. It seemed Naruto had missed the large procession of genin. If he had seen them, surely that would be enough to spark his interests. She couldn't blame him for feeling bored though. The entire event was mostly hands-off by the village except for the exam proctors. The rest of the Junin and Chunin would not be doing much of anything related. Come on, Kakashi was just finishing up with Team 7. We can walk to the lounge together. The thought of seeing his new teacher again seemed to reinvigorate him. Naruto and Kakashi got along well together for some reason, even if they acted differently. Naruto was reserved but cheerful. Kakashi was almost isolated in comparison. She kept her distance from everyone. The blonde was the first one she had shown any interest in. A few stragglers aside, the halls were empty. It was kind of odd seeing the academy, usually so full of life, now almost like a tomb. Naruto tried to play it off as just anxiety, but it bothered him. Kurenai seemed to not notice as they deftly navigated the halls. That was something many of the genin seemed to have trouble doing even if they had been through these halls countless times before. Maybe that was another test the Chunin exam offered, an unwritten one, to test the nerves. As they went up the last flight of stairs, Kakashi came into view. She was already making progress down the hall toward the lounge, hands in pocket. Nothing seemed to faze her about leaving her charges to the wolves. Perhaps Kakashi was just quicker to accept that it was for the best. Kakashi. Hearing Kurenai, the silver-haired Junin turned around. When she saw her fellow Kunoichi's charge, she realized what was going on. She was beginning to wonder if Naruto was going to show up for his mission. Now that he was there and had already missed Team 7's goodbyes, there was little left to see. Kurenai-san, Naruto. Good to see you made it, though there isn't anything left to do but wait. They joined her by the entrance, taking a moment before entering. Asuma and Guy were most likely inside already. So Kakashi-sensei, what exactly am I supposed to be doing? The Hokage just said report to you. Naruto made his assumptions but really he had no idea. You won't be seeing much for the first exam unfortunately, it is a written test. We aren't allowed inside for obvious reasons, so for now we wait. Once the first exam is finished, the Junin will make their way to the second exam's location. Naruto, I think you'll like that one. Kurenai shared a glance with Kakashi, clearly knowing what she was talking about. Naruto had only the faintest idea, so he didn't appreciate their conspiratorial looks. Come on, everyone else is already comfortable. They went inside with the Genjutsu mistresses urging. Guy and Asuma were already here, along with a few other Junin from squads Naruto didn't recognize. Most were sitting in the booths while a few chose to stand and talk near a drink dispenser. Most everyone paid attention as they came in, eyes locked on the blonde. "What's a Chunin doing here?" one of the Junin asked, confused. "Yeah, don't you have something better to do?" another said with a haughty tone, taking a swig of his drink. Naruto didn't like their attitudes but said nothing. He didn't have to. Kurenai and Kakashi made it clear he was with them, even Guy glared at the offending Junin. "Hokage's orders, mind your business." Kakashi ended that conversation with her flat, no argument tone. Kurenai looked no less serious, arms crossed. The first one whom had been genuinely confused put his hands up in surrender. Last thing he wanted to do was bother the two ice queens of the village. His rude counterpart however clearly had some backbone and was not about to back down. Nico had followed the village's orders since he was as young as some of the academy students. He earned his rank with blood and sweat, and watched even more of his friends and comrades lose their lives. That was why it annoyed him that this kid with the whisker face got to go on some mission and suddenly thought of himself as all that. The only reason he got a promotion was the Hokage's special treatment, nothing more. "I'm just saying that someone like him disrespects the rest of us by being here. What has he done to stand in these halls and call himself a Chunin?" When Kakashi realized the idiot was being serious, she got serious too. To make her point, she approached Nico to speak face to face. Hands on her hips, her voice remained neutral if not a bit annoyed. Naruto had been waiting for a chance to become Chunin for longer than he should have. Not just that, if it wasn't for him the mission would have failed. He demonstrated ability that surpassed what anyone expected. It was ludicrous she had to explain this again, but for some reason Nico didn't hear anything meaningful. "All I see is a weak kunoichi. That needed saving by the Hokage's pet." To hammer his point home, he jabbed a finger at Kakashi's chest, but was stopped mid-step, even before Asuma or Guy could get up. Naruto stood next to Kakashi, crossing the distance with little more than a flicker. His gloved hand held the protruding finger tightly, not enough to break but enough to hurt. No one would disrespect Kakashi after Naruto had seen what she had to go through for the sake of that mission, not even the Hokage could have. That was why Naruto was seriously thinking about breaking his finger to teach Nico a lesson. Nico was trying to ease his finger out of Naruto's grip but yelped when he only tightened his hold. "She doesn't have to take that from anyone, especially not you." A soft voice calmed his heaving chest. Her hand rested on his shoulder, the thumb just barely touching the nape of his neck. Even if he had gone too far, even if he would get punished for it, Naruto wouldn't back down until someone he trusted told him to. "Naruto, it's fine. Just relax." Kakashi knew she had to keep him calm if she wanted the situation to not escalate further. The last thing they needed was the fox making a reappearance. She was flattered if not a bit confused at why Naruto reacted the way he did, but petty squabbles weren't important. There were bigger things they had to be concerned for during such an important event like the exams. With much reluctance Naruto let him go, but remained close to Kakashi. Nico was visually infuriated to be humbled by Naruto, but many others were intimidated. Naruto may have just been a Chunin but his eyes promised murder if anyone tried to hurt someone close to him. "This ain't over, kid. Not by a long shot." The offender waved his hand through dirty pink hair, visibly frustrated he couldn't take out his anger. There was a time and place for that and he would make sure to show Naruto what it meant to be a Konoha ninja. That was something there was no way he could learn, one tough mission or not. Kakashi led Naruto over to where Asuma and Guy were getting settled in again. She needed to remember to keep those two away from each other to avoid further conflict. Nico didn't know the kind of hornet's nest he was poking and it could have disastrous results for the both of them. If Kakashi could do anything, she wanted to keep Naruto's hands clean of the blood of a fellow Konoha shinobi. To have to go through that experience was not something she would wish on anyone. Well, Naruto, you sure know how to start a party. Things were quiet till you got here, Asuma said, trying to lighten things up. A glare from Kurenai cut him short and he realized that the comment was made in bad taste. The quicker the confrontation was out of mind, the better. Naruto-kun, your youth was on great display just then. I haven't seen a man come to a woman's aid with that speed since, well, since myself. Guy gave him a thumbs up and bright smile, making Naruto grin. Thanks, I think. Kurenai and Kakashi sat on Naruto's sides while Asuma and Guy sat across. There was an odd tinge of jealousy both men experienced as they watched the women cling abnormally close to the blonde. He was clearly oblivious about the attention, or didn't consider it outside of the norm. Neither of the girls might have realized what they were doing either, but clearly they were concerned about his well-being after the fight. Nico and the rest of them were pushed from mind as they just started to talk about the day. What each of them did and how their genin were before the test started. It was nothing special, but Naruto felt right at home. That was something Nico couldn't take away from him, the moments he shared with his precious people. Forest of Death. Tower. Naruto and the rest of the Junin made their way through the second exam's training ground with little effort. They dodged and evaded all matter of creatures and plants, even a few leftover traps from the genin teams whom had gone farther in. Kakashi stayed close to him, ensuring Naruto's safety. That was especially important to the Hokage as he put her mission orders in perspective. With so many foreign shinobi, they could not risk leaving Naruto alone for long. Not to mention that Nico had not stopped giving Naruto a glare since they left the lounge. She did not know if the unruly man would try something. Luckily they made it through with little trouble and Nico was not permitted to go to the tower. His team had failed the written exam, fitting she felt. It displayed a failure in his teachings rather than the individual genin. He didn't raise them to the standards he supposedly set himself to, standards Naruto apparently did not meet. Fool, the only proper term to describe. Her thoughts were shared but not expressed by many of the others. The procession of ranked shinobi included Junin from foreign nations like Suna and Oto. Neither of them seemed all that polite or welcoming, so Konoha steered clear, preferring to stay with their own. Everyone was headed in the same direction though. They were to see the Hokage and wait for their teams to arrive. Hiruzen waited in one of the rooms higher up in the tower. It was littered with tubes and monitors that allowed the attending shinobi to keep an eye on the second exam takers as well as the environment itself. A few Anbu were present as well at the Hokage's bequest, arms folded at his flanks with bored faces hidden behind porcelain. Shortly before the Junin arrived, a proctor arrived to alert the Hokage. He turned and watched as the nicely sized group of older shinobi entered, all bowing in respect to the cage. Not even the foreign countries were immune from that. Then he saw Naruto closely attended to by Kakashi and a smile graced his lips. It was good to see they had made it safely. Welcome Junin, to where you will be spending quite some time for the next few days. Here in the tower you will wait for the victorious genin to arrive, in which we will progress to the next stage of the exams. Though the idea of staying in the tower was not all the appealing, the thought of their teams walking through the gates victorious was enough to sway most of those present. Naruto had to admit that, even if he only knew what little Kakashi and the others explained to him, the Chunin exams were intense. It didn't bother any confidence he already had in himself, but somewhere in the back of his mind he was glad he wasn't slogging through the forest with the rest of them. His thoughts drifted to Team 7 and there was some concern. Was Sakura doing alright? Would Arata listen to the others, or was Sasuke even properly leading them? He guessed he would find out soon enough. A hand on his shoulder made him turn and see Kakashi indicate he follow her out. Come on, no point in staying here with the rest. Where are we going? A mischievous glint came to her revealed eye, surprising Naruto. He was not sure he had seen that side of Kakashi before. He had no idea she knew how to have fun. The thought sounded bad after he said it, but it still rang true with the rumors of her status as Ice Queen. Somewhere with a great view. Kakashi led him upstairs past where most of the rest of the staff bothered to work. There they went through a set of doors that led them to the very tip of the tower. It commanded a respectable view of the entire forest, and even out farther, the trees were barely stalks of grass in comparison. Holy! Naruto walked over to the edge. They were up so high that no safety railing existed. All the real viewing areas were farther below. Kakashi joined him without as much reaction. She had been here a few times before. Once during the Chunin exams she herself took as a child, as well as during her time in the ANBU. When she was first showed this spot by her sensei, she couldn't much believe it herself. Oh, here Kakashi, I have something to show you. Consider it a reward for your performance. What do you mean, sensei? Wah! Before the poor girl could argue, Minato flashed through space and time. They appeared on the roof, Kakashi flopping to the ground. She was still not used to that experience and doubted she ever would be. When she realized where they were, she gasped in amazement. Sensei! Is this the very top? Yes. The view was so great I had to mark it. I return here every so often to think. Kakashi could see why. It was so serene up there. Without the wind there was barely a sound. She would have promised to remember the spot, if it was something forgettable. Luckily, that was unnecessary. Kakashi, promise me something. The young girl looked back at her sensei, hair blowing in the wind. Be sure to bring someone close to you to this spot. Don't let it be forgotten. The thought of Obito joining her there gave Kakashi a light feeling in her stomach. It sort of made her uncomfortable. No, the idiot wouldn't appreciate it anyway. She would have to wait. Oh, sure, sensei. Kakashi whispered her response out of Naruto's earshot. It had taken a while, but she found someone to bring along. Maybe it was only fitting it be Minato's son, but for some reason she didn't think that was the reason she chose Naruto. The smile on his face was enough to tell her alone it was the right decision. He almost reminded her of Minato as he stood there in a similar pose, arms crossed and face calm as he took in the view. Something like this can't go to waste, Kakashi-sensei. Someday we should come back here, maybe bring someone else along. Kakashi smiled. He was right. A moment like that couldn't go to waste. Sure. Naruto-kun, let me know when you find someone. Some time later. You who are gathered today have successfully completed the second exam, displaying your abilities to survive as a shinobi. Here's and welcome the remaining genin teams, all lined up to be presented. There were more than Anko had first expected, so they would have need of the preliminary match format, but first an introduction and congratulation was in order. Their bodies were caked in dirt and light wounds, they deserved that much. Naruto stood behind the Hokage as he gave his speech, along with the rest of the remaining Junin. Kakashi stood at his side, looking no more attentive than usual. The others held themselves to a bit higher regard, hands clasped at their backs or arms at their sides, eyes straight. Naruto was like them, he was unable to act in such a laid-back manner in such an important event, especially with the Hokage right there. They were representing Konoha after all, right? Those who had their team fail were sent to collect them, or their remains. It was a grisly job, but no Junin would refuse it. It was the worst wake-up call one could receive, but a necessary one. It was a warning, a grave one, for the next group that Junin may train, to make them work that much harder to see it not happen again. Naruto's interest peaked when they revealed that the latter part of the exam would consist of preliminary matches. Those would decide who could move on to the final part, some sort of battle royale a month from then. He followed Kakashi as she walked with Team 7 to the balconies that lined their concrete arena. So Naruto, you've been taking good care of Sensei while we were away? Urata asked with a coy smile. Before Sakura could give him another good hit to the head, Naruto beamed. Yep. No worries there. They were frozen mid-step, even Kakashi's eye widened. Seems like you guys handled yourselves well so far. Don't fail now. Sasuke was the first to recover, a smart grin on his face. Naturally. None of these guys are strong enough to challenge us after all. He crossed his arms in confidence, but Naruto felt something off about him. It was like his body was barely holding it together. Kakashi must have picked up on it too, her eye focusing on the Uchiha. Urata grinned, nodding in agreement. Sakura, her hair now cut short from some battle in the forest, couldn't enjoy the praise. She was too worried about Sasuke after what Orochimaru did to him. Naruto led the two genin over to a free spot in the stands while Kakashi whispered something in Sasuke's ear. His eyes widened for a moment, surprised by what she said. He quickly recovered as Kakashi patted his shoulder, carefully, and returned to where Naruto was. They stood with the team as Hayate quickly got the show started. A monitor appeared and revealed who the first two fighters would be, Sasuke and Yoroi. Those two were promptly herded to the arena as the rest of them geared up to watch how the Uchiha would handle the fight. Upon Sasuke's victory, Kakashi quickly dismissed herself to attend to the genin. It seemed that whatever was wrong was more than the medical ninja could handle, as she waved them off. Naruto watched as Sasuke was led away by her, unsure of what to do. Kakashi gave an unspoken order that she had wanted Naruto to stay. It was clear in her body language she was not to be followed, but it didn't make him feel any better. Naruto looked at Urata and Sakura, both were clearly concerned for their teammate. Not even the rogue could hide his feelings, those small hands of his were balled into fists. Whoever did whatever to Sasuke that was making him like that had made some enemies in Team 7. Faking a smile, Naruto tussled Urata's brown hair and winked. Don't worry, Kakashi will handle it. The tension left them as Urata pouted about being treated like a kid. The Chunin's mind was elsewhere, however, and he made a silent decision in his mind to check on something. Only a few of the ninja in the room, namely the more attentive Junin, noticed Naruto subtly leave a clone of himself behind as he flickered through the exit. The Hokage tipped his hat, concerned that something had happened. If Naruto was willing to make that kind of exit, it was clearly something was wrong. I'll leave it to you, Naruto. Be careful. The matches continued, unaware that two Konoha shinobi were about to have a very real, very frightening run-in with an S-class criminal. That should do it. Sasuke's grunts and groans of pain ceased as he fell to the floor, unconscious. Kakashi had just finished sealing the cursed mark, the seal in which Orochimaru placed on her student during the second exam. Sasuke was lucky to be alive by any count if what happened to Anko told them anything. Then again, perhaps it was more appropriate that he be considered cursed. Congratulations, Kakashi. Good for you, sealing away that nasty mark. Her eyes widened when she realized just who was speaking. Kakashi turned on her heel to face Orochimaru, who emerged from the shadows. His wide smile coupled with the malice hidden behind it was enough to turn her entire body cold. She tensed in case he was going to try anything, she needed to be ready. Orochimaru. Isn't this a bit bold of you? The criminal said nothing for a bit, approaching her. When he did speak, it was very casual, as if she wasn't even a threat. I am only here to retrieve my prize. You did not conceal the fact Sasuke survived the attack very well, you only can blame yourself. One more step toward her made Kakashi lower her right arm and begin to gather chakra. She used her left hand to hold her right wrist, helping her keep control of the technique. He wouldn't get Sasuke as long as she was breathing. You will come no further. Reikiri. Orochimaru just laughed, a truly entertained laugh. She actually thought that would stop him. Come on Kakashi, that won't be enough to stop me. Just stand aside. Before he could go any farther, another sound rang out. Instead of the crackle of unkempt lightning, this was the whipping of a powerful windstorm. They turned to see Naruto appear from the darkness, from behind a pillar. He had been waiting for the right moment to interrupt, hoping that Orochimaru would run from Kakashi alone. There was no way he would let her fight this fight alone, even if he was outmatched. You'll have to go through me too. Orochimaru saw the Jinchuriki brat and scowled, his fun ruined. Kakashi wanted to reprimand Naruto for coming, but she was most likely still alive because he was there. HMPH. Konoha has become a lot more annoying since I left. Fighting the two of you might be a bit too much, so I suppose I can wait until Sasuke comes to me on his own. Orochimaru turned to Kakashi, who still stood ready to strike, even if a bit of fear gripped her heart. Now is your chance, Kakashi. Just try and kill me, see if you can save your precious student. He turned to leave, binding both her and Naruto in a very powerful aura of killing intent. It was enough to make them both flinch. Naruto even fell to one knee. So that was the power of an S-class shinobi, not something either one of them were willing experience again. They just remained there for a while, collecting themselves. Then Kakashi collected Sasuke and told Naruto to return to the stands. They had to keep appearances normal. She would deposit the Uchiha at the hospital and return, so he had to keep Arata and Sakura calm. Although he was hesitant to leave Kakashi alone after that encounter, he knew that his element of surprise was useless. Not to mention there was little he could do against Orochimaru in his current state. Begrudgingly he returned to the stands to watch the finishing part of Arata's match against Tenten. There wasn't much left for him to watch though, because Tenten had just about run out of tricks. Arata had her on the run with his technique, manipulating her own barrage against her. She did her best to dodge or block, but any weapon she tried to use just added to the boy's arsenal. Obviously tired, Tenten gave up when she realized that she just was not able to fight in her current condition. Hayate made the ruling final and the weapons fell to the ground, motionless. The applause was sporadic, but again it came from the Konoha side. Naruto and a few others gave him the deserving applause, while Team Guy looked disappointed with the outcome. No one could blame Tenten though, she was outmatched from the start. Her over-reliance on the weapons turned into her downfall. That said, no one could understand Arata's technique either, not even Arata himself. Although he was more willing to use it now with Naruto's training and Kakashi's advice, it was still a mostly unknown ability he had. Its power was obvious though, if that display was anything to go by. Only Baki seemed to realize the magnitude of what he was watching, with experience in seeing not one but two of the cage display a similar skill. How Konoha got their hands on such a powerful technique, he did not know, but it only meant that their plans would effectively prevent Arata from going any further. Suna's honor would be restored. When Kakashi excused herself a second time, there was just a minor change from the last time. When she took Sasuke out of the room, she made no inclination for Naruto to follow. This time, it was as if she was baiting him to come with, lingering at the doorway. To Naruto, that meant she wanted his help. Leaving the genin of Team 7 under Guy's care, Naruto excused himself to catch up with Kakashi. Knowing her, she was going to check up on Sasuke. It seemed as if Orochimaru gave up too easily, as displayed in his power to subdue the both of them with ease. If he could do that, why not take Sasuke? No, he must have had another plan that wouldn't implicate him. It was no secret that Orochimaru had his own network of spies around the world, including inside of Konoha. He might have relegated the task of capturing Sasuke to one of them. There was no doubt Kakashi put Sasuke under guard considering Orochimaru's interest in him, but would they be enough? If Kakashi was worried enough to return to the room, it meant that whoever it was strong. Naruto ran as fast as he could and arrived at the hospital's top floor in no time. He had to guess they were keeping Sasuke in the suite to keep him out of the way, but the carnage in the hallway showed that it wasn't enough. Anbu bodies were scattered all around. It was almost as if they fell without putting up a fight. That was the first tip-off there was danger, but no sign that Kakashi was already inside. The door was left ajar, a body keeping it from closing. Naruto took out his chakra blades and quickly fitted them on, shuffling to the door's edge. He sensed someone running toward the door and leapt out in front, arms up and ready. Kabuto's Anbu double stopped in its tracks, its escape route cut off. Now it looked between Kakashi and Naruto, unsure of what to do. Kakashi knew Naruto would follow her, she was actually counting on it. With him surrounded now, Kakashi approached while Naruto entered with his guard up. They couldn't afford to let the spy get away. Another of the bodies stirred, forcing their attention from one Anbu to another. It threw shuriken at one of the windows and leapt through the weakened glass, leaving Kakashi and Naruto only a moment behind. Before Naruto could leap out in pursuit, Kakashi stopped him with an outstretched hand. They couldn't afford to run after him, it was too late anyway. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto whispered through bared teeth, realizing the same thing. She turned to her student, smiling. Even in that situation, she could smile. Perhaps more accurately, she could put on a mask. Nicely done, Naruto. Without you things might have gotten worse. But Kakashi, no point in arguing now, she said in a serious tone, cutting off his argument. Stay here with Sasuke while I get some help to clean up the mess. Disappointed, Naruto watched her disappear into the hallway. He looked at Sasuke and had to wonder just what cards fate had dealt the Uchiha to give him that much bad luck. Not only that, he wondered what it meant for Kakashi and the rest of Konoha should they lose him to the darkness. Some time later, Konohagakure hospital lobby. Kakashi had gathered Team 7, minus Sakura, to explain what the training month would be like. The two kunoichi had met earlier and Sakura decided to pursue her own training regardless if she lost or not. Kakashi would take Sasuke while Arata would be taught by Ebisu. Naruto had joined them at Kakashi's request, although her news was anything but good. He knew she wanted to keep an eye on Sasuke considering Orochimaru's presence, but they wouldn't be able to train together with her focus on him, not to mention she was taking him to the outskirts of Konoha. Is that satisfactory? Sasuke, Arata. The two looked between each other, their rivalry still growing. Fine by me. Let's get to it. With them taken care of, she dismissed them to prepare. She then turned to Naruto and gave the best look of apology she could. If things went her way during the exams, she would have trained Naruto side by side with the rest of Team 7. Unfortunately, Orochimaru ruined that. Sorry Naruto. You will have to go without me for a month. Naruto just shook his head, he understood. He didn't like it, but he understood. It's alright Kakashi-sensei, I know why. They watched Sasuke leave, concern creasing their expressions. This may not be any consolation, but I have a feeling someone else will be able to help you more than me. Keep in touch with Kurenai and Asuma, they should be able to at least get you started. Naruto may not have been participating in the final exams, but that didn't make his progress any less important. Whether they thought of it that way or not, having a strong Jinchuriki was good for the village as a whole. Understood. Be careful Kakashi-sensei. Don't worry too much Naruto-kun, I can handle myself. She set a hand on his shoulder when a look of regret crossed his eyes. Thank you though. Her smile made him feel a little better. They parted ways and Naruto decided that, since he didn't have any other obligations, he would go to the hot springs. He needed to relax after such a stressful past few days. Little did he know that trip to the hot springs would be a lot more eventful than he was expecting. Hot springs. Ah. Now this is nice. Naruto had shed his towel and started to relax in a private spring room. He had no idea the Sarutobi had permanent reservations, but he wasn't one to look a gift horse in the mouth. In the distance he could hear a bunch of women splashing around, gossiping, and giggling. Must have been a party on the other side of the bamboo, not that he would want to know anyway. He liked girls, sure, but being a pervert about it wasn't his style. Hiruzen taught him better than that. At least he preached it. Sometimes Naruto wondered if his grandfather was as innocent as he made himself out to be. Judging from Asuma's mouth, it was nowhere near the case. No point in dwelling on that right now, let's just relax. Right after he said that and had settled deeper in the hot water, Naruto saw someone perched above the bamboo. He was somewhat clumsily using the walls as both a viewpoint and cover, but his back was totally exposed to Naruto. Maybe he wasn't expecting anyone to see him from the men's side, maybe he expected no one to care. Naruto for one was not either of those, and the thought of a pervert spying on women bothered him. It bothered him even more when the thought crossed his mind that someone he might know very well, like Kurenai, could be on the other side and this man was getting to see her like that. No, he couldn't have that. With a combination of speed and finesse, Naruto emerged from the bath and got dressed prematurely. He might not be ruining just his experience in the springs that day with what he was about to do, but it had to be done. Naruto cracked his knuckles before jumping up onto the wall for himself. Carefully he approached so he didn't get seen by the women bathing or the suspect himself. Then, when he was close enough, Naruto decided to try a technique he had seen Kakashi so aptly demonstrate on Naruto numerous times. 1,000 years of pain. With a good amount of power, Naruto sent Jiraiya flying with the invasive hit. It forced him into holding his behind in pain and wailing at the top of his lungs. All the women looked up to see what the commotion was, some of them screaming pervert and running for their towels. Oh, is that the cute Uzumaki boy? Is it? Hey, this is the women's bath. Go to your side, pervert. I don't mind, come on in cutie. Naruto had accidentally stood up to full height after sending the pervert away, revealing his presence to the women in the bath. He realized his fault and looked away, not seeing anything in particular. Two vocal groups got into an argument over whether he should be allowed to join them or not, much to his embarrassment. It seemed the women who found Naruto attractive were winning as a collective sigh of disappointment could be heard when Naruto leapt away to catch the escaping Jiraiya. Hold it right there, pal. Naruto stopped Jiraiya who, albeit was trying to leave the scene, was doing so extremely slowly with hands guarding his rear. Hey, you're the asshole that hit me in the ass. You were peeping on the women in the bath. So, that isn't an excuse to do this to another man. He pointed at his butt, clearly incensed. Naruto placed his hands on his sides, not backing down. It was then that he recognized who the man was from Hiruzen. His grandfather had told him a lot about his students and Naruto could easily identify Jiraiya from the detailed description, right down to his perverted preferences. Jiraiya of the Sannin. Upon hearing his title, the old hermit seemed to recover with a knowing smirk. So, his name preceded him even with the younger generation. Understandable, considering his fame reached even the smallest, most influential circles and corners of the world. I see you've heard of me, what can I do for such an impressionable young ninja like yourself? He struck a heroic pose but was quickly rebuked. Oh, nothing, just making sure I had the right name to report to the Hokage. See ya. Before he could jump away, Jiraiya cried out for him to stop. Wait a minute, I can't afford to get caught. I mean the Hokage isn't expecting me for a while. Can't we work something out? Naruto didn't seem like he was buying it. Jiraiya had to up the ante, even if it meant giving up some of his valuable research time. He supposed it would be worth it to teach Minato's kid something, he owed that much. Alright kid, how about this? Let me show you a few techniques. Around a month later, Konohagakure Stadium, nice place. Naruto walked the stands with Asuma and Kurenai, standing in awe of the building. He had actually never been there before. The experience was totally unique now that the place was littered with civilians and shinobi alike, waiting impatiently for the matches to start. Most of the genin had already arrived, save for who some argued was the most important, Sasuke Uchiha. That also meant Kakashi was missing. Naruto had no doubt the two were still training and would arrive on time for the match, all that effort wouldn't be put to waste. For now he was fine with being near his loved ones and trying to enjoy the chaotic atmosphere. Asuma and Kurenai sat down with Naruto in the middle, his eyes flicking over to the cage viewing area. The Hokage sat there joined by the Kazekage. Two of the most influential people in the world. Naruto watched in awe, hoping one day he too could sit in that seat. Loud, isn't it? Asuma yelled over the din of cheering. Kurenai didn't much care for it, preferring a calm and quiet viewing instead. She knew it was no better where Hinata and Kiba, or anyone for that matter, were viewing from, so she had to tough it out. Naruto was somewhat with her, but he could bear it. He wanted to see how Arata and Sasuke did and how the rest of the genin turned out, considering that Naruto missed a majority of the matches. They watched as Sasuke's match was delayed, forcing them to quickly move to Shikamaru and Temari. The Nara fought well, but in the end he gave up halfway on a technicality. Come on Shikamaru. You could have finished it. That boy needs to learn one of these days he can't leave things half done. Maybe he really didn't have enough chakra to continue. Kurenai suggested, trying to keep Asuma from biting his student's head off. I think that is Nara laziness, Kurenai-chan. Naruto pointed out with a smile, earning a nod from Asuma. The next match was one Naruto had been waiting for, Arata versus Neji. These two had some animosity since the academy, but why, Naruto did not know. Seeing a Hyuga defend against Arata's manipulation technique would be interesting. Since rumors had gone around over what Arata could do, not all the bets were on Neji, the people were loud, anxious to see which one might win. It turned out to be a bloody close affair, as expected. As things turned out, Arata wasn't a one-trick pony, although he did use his kunai attack often to keep Neji on his toes. The Hyuga's defense was too strong though, which forced Arata to use techniques that resembled tricks or pranks to fight with. He had some skill in stealth, but Neji's eyes nullified that advantage, which forced him to use unconventional methods. Explosive tags hidden underground, clones, puppet daggers and every type of ninja tool was thrown at Neji, but he somehow weathered through. Both of them were dead tired by the end, which as far as Naruto was concerned meant they were closely matched, something Neji had claimed was untrue before the match started. Arata landed the final blow by using his element to traverse underground undetected, landing a blow on Neji's jaw. It was quiet for a while before Naruto and a few others started clapping, giving way to a roar of applause and other uproar. Naruto was proud of Arata's progress and knew he could only go forward from there. Kurenai saw Naruto's look upon the genin's victory and smiled. It was almost as if it was Naruto himself winning, he seemed ecstatic. Through more delay tactics, Sasuke's match had finally come on as the final event. Through the latest roar of boos came a puff of smoke in the arena. Kakashi had arrived with Sasuke in tow, ready just in time for his match. Guy quickly met up with her and led her to his side of the stands, giving Naruto a bit of disappointment. He had hoped to be the one to see Kakashi first and fill her in on what happened with Team 7. Don't worry so much Naruto. Asuma held his shoulder, shaking it roughly. Guy doesn't stand a chance, he just can't see it. Naruto tried to tell his brother he was wrong but was stunned when Kurenai joined in. He's right Naruto, Kakashi isn't interested in Guy whatsoever. I almost feel bad for him. He knew there was nothing he could say to get them to stop teasing, so he just settled in for the long haul. Sasuke and Gaara began their fight with nothing extraordinary, although there was something about Gaara that bothered Naruto. It was just a familiar feeling, a sense that there were unseen parallels between the two of them. It wasn't long before Sasuke overzealously revealed his new technique, the Chidori. Making use of their shared lightning elements, Kakashi must have decided to teach him it, hoping it would help him against Orochimaru. Naruto wasn't so sure that was a good idea. Sasuke wasn't as easy to please as she thought. His aggressiveness in battle was enough to draw the attention of both Kage and many shinobi watching. They wondered if Gaara's dome of sand was enough to hold back the chirping attack. Soon they realized that it was not enough as Sasuke punctured the shield and attacked Gaara, spurring his transformation to occur sooner. That was much to the horror of the present Suna Nin, knowing the plan was already on the rocks. Naruto stood up, Gaara's blood-curdling scream visibly shaking him. What the hell was going on down there? What was Gaara doing in that ball? It wasn't hard for him to sense a chakra buildup. Sasuke was forced back as sand spikes launched out in a defensive measure, catching him in the cheek. Before he could formulate a counterattack, Gaara dropped his sand dome and revealed he was already transforming into the inner beast. He made his way out of the arena walls with great speed, leaving Sasuke and the rest of the crowd in surprise. That was when something odd happened. Naruto watched as all sound left the arena and was replaced by sweet, serene silence coupled with countless feathers tickling his consciousness. It would be enough to lull him into sleep, but Kurenai had taught him to recognize genjutsu like that. He held up a ram hand sign and focused his chakra, dispelling the technique. Release. Naruto opened his eyes to see an Odo ninja coming right at his face, kunai in hand. Naruto! Asuma yelled, seeing the danger. In slow motion, Naruto arched his back so that the attack passed harmlessly over his body. With his body low enough to touch the ground, Naruto used his hands as leverage and launched his feet up. They connected with the Odo ninja's stomach, sending him right into the ceiling, unconscious from the impact. Naruto flipped backward while at the same time revealing his chakra blades, ready to defend himself. He risked a glance behind him and saw Asuma and Kurenai back to back on the stairs, fending off more of the attackers. Quickly he rejoined them, fending off the enemy shinobi as they attacked in waves. What the hell is going on? Naruto asked as he landed a slice on an Odo Chunin before they could get near Kurenai. Looks like we're under attack, some sort of genjutsu knocked everyone else out. Asuma replied, breathing in air for a Kaden technique. All around them was chaos as leaf and sound attacked one another, blurs sparking above the stands. Smoke covered the cage stand, preventing them from seeing whether Hiruzen was alright or not. They had a sinking feeling in their stomachs, but watched as Anbu traveled the rooftops in that same direction. Have to leave it to them. Naruto and Asuma thought, too preoccupied with their own battles. The Suna Junin had been cut off from his students by Genma down below. No other Suna shinobi had been seen, but it was safe to say they were in league with Odo. Sasuke had taken off after Gaara soon after the invasion began, preventing anyone from easily tracking him. Urata and Sakura must have been with Kakashi, they had to be, Naruto hoped. Aoba leapt onto their stand and made their triangle formation into a square. The Tokubetsu Junin used a kunai and Kaden techniques to keep the enemies at bay while trying to relay intel. Looks like the entire village is getting hit, these guys. He kicked another hooded figure away. Are everywhere, same with Suna. Hard to tell what their targets are, but it looks like they are after us first. Made sense, civilians didn't pose any threat in a shinobi village. If you could hunt down the shinobi of the village, the battle and possibly the war was effectively over. Most of the fighting is moving away from us, I think. Summons are trying to break through the west wall, not sure how long it will hold. Asuma looked around and saw that the Odo shinobi were focusing their attack at the stadium, meaning whatever they wanted was there. He also saw Kakashi struggling to defend a few genin on her own. Guy seemed to be everywhere at once, but he couldn't help her in time. Naruto, go across and help Kakashi. It looks like she needs it. Naruto looked at his older brother and saw he was being serious. No more teasing, this was real. They were really in a war and he needed to stay focused if he wanted to stay alive and protect the village. For now, he had to help Kakashi. Understood. Aoba, Kurenai, we'll hold here and mop up. Understood. Naruto leapt over the railing, putting all his power in the jump. Behind him Asuma and the others remained to finish off those Odo shinobi left, but all around him battles raged. It had all happened so fast, Naruto was still trying to process the situation. What the hell is going on? For the third time he had to repeat himself, it felt all the more appropriate. Wrote this while I was on the train back home, knew I could find something productive to do. Hope you enjoyed this large chapter as it gets us right into the action. I'm trying to get better at focusing on the more important aspects of my story so that way I can progress faster without as much filler but with the same amount of length. Hello everyone, we are back for some Return of Darkness. I'm hoping to keep pushing through this story with the heavy content per chapter. If possible, I would like to get all of my current canon Naruto stories to the Part 1 intermission and then release the Part 2 debut chapters all at once. If everything goes well, Blonde Uchiha has one large chapter remaining for it, which I will actually write after this is uploaded. Then we will go to Namikaze Assassin, which has about 1 or 2 chapters left in it until Part 2. Really excited as these stories are the first stories I have done from Part 1 to Part 2, since UCR started at the end of Part 1. Good stuff to come, I think. Since most didn't get to see the poll after I closed it, the ending revealed that Fu was the most popular girl on the list. I was quite surprised to see Koyuki Kazuhana reach second place after being added late, but all of the girls listed got some sort of vote. The top 3 or 5 will be featured as an ending pairing and, while Naruto will meet all of them and more, I will be trying something unique with multiple ending chapters. That means that it isn't a harem, each chapter will be dedicated with one of the girls who are most liked. This is something I really wished would happen more often in anime with multiple girls. Hopefully when the story gets to that point, you will enjoy it too. Let's read. Kanahagakure. Stadium. Kakashi had her back against the wall, literally. When the invasion started, Sakura and Arata were with her watching the matches proceed. The boy had come up from the contestant box to complain to her about Gaara. At first, she ignored his pleas because of Sasuke's overall advantage. When things took a turn for the worse as Sasuke landed the first hit with Chidori, then she knew something might be wrong. Then the genjutsu kicked in and Arata went out like a light, but Sakura recognized the attack and was able to stay awake. Unfortunately, her skill made her a target. With her speed, Kakashi was able to keep them off of Sakura and kill a good number. The amount of enemies was too overwhelming though, and she was being forced back. Guy had gone off to pick up the slack in another area, believing Kakashi could handle herself. That much was true, but she had to watch over Sakura too. Damn it, Guy. Of all times too. Kakashi ducked under a slice that would have hit her face and impaled the enemy with a kunai from below. He toppled over, his lifeless body resting near Arata's prone form. There were too many to face with just knives, she would have to use her chakra. 2 of the Oto shinobi leapt toward Sakura, forcing the Junin's attention away from her own well-being. From outside the corner of her vision, Asuna shinobi prepared to deliver a powerful blow. Kakashi was in the middle of twisting her body toward Sakura, lightning chakra crackling in her hand, when reinforcements arrived. Kunai embedded themselves in the backs of the 2 Oto shinobi. It sent them down to the ground like dead weights, just a few feet from Sakura. The young genin cowered in fear but looked around for her savior, only to see the enemy behind her sensei. Kakashi saw Sakura's reaction but knew she wouldn't be able to turn fast enough. Naruto appeared right in front of Kakashi, his face pressing against her chest. His arms reached around behind her and the faint whine of his chakra blades could be heard. Warm liquid hit her back and neck, and she knew that Naruto had sliced the enemy clean through. They stayed connected like that for a moment too long, and Naruto stepped back with a slightly red face. Sorry, Kakashi. Kakashi didn't even think twice about it. She had never been so happy to see a friendly face. You saved us, Naruto. The 2 Konoha shinobi turned as more Oto and Suna shinobi approached. If they couldn't match quality, the enemies could make up for it in quantity. Naruto readied his chakra blades while Kakashi grabbed 2 kunai, 1 for each hand. It was time for a counterattack. Now that she had a competent partner, they could get something done. Time to cut down the enemy numbers. Naruto, you take left. Understood. Asuna Shinobi went through hand signs to prepare a jutsu. They didn't have to worry about collateral damage, a clear advantage over Konoha when it came to ninjutsu. Maybe their techniques would kill civilians or genin, but as long as it killed the enemy, it was worth the sacrifice. You guys don't. Before he could even complete his taunt, Naruto disappeared in a blur and Kakashi released one of her kunai at blinding speed. The blade impaled the would-be jutsu user in the head and, before his partners could realize the danger, the Junin was in the middle of their formation. Her kunai sunk deep into one of their abdomens, right below the iron plate inside the vest. Kakashi's other hand gathered lightning chakra, a lethal amount, and grabbed another one's arm. The man didn't even get to scream in agony before his life left him. The last one, an Oto shinobi, was in the middle of turning to face her when Kakashi pulled her dagger from the enemy's back. Suddenly, a devastating kick sent him flying out of the stand and into the arena wall on the opposite side. Kakashi saw Naruto recover from the taijutsu strike and noticed that he had gotten done with the left flank. 3 more enemies lay in a pool of their own blood, left where they dropped. He was getting better and better. Perhaps there was no better place for Naruto to show his skills than in a war. It bothered her for a moment, as if she thought the boy would remain innocent. Something about Naruto made it seem like he would fit better among friends than covered in blood. She had to admit though, the tenacious almost feral look he wore during fighting was almost attractive. Kakashi! Guy shouted, landing a few feet away. A lifeless Oto shinobi hung underneath his arm, his neck broken. The body was discarded as the taijutsu user approached his rival, concern laced in his voice. Are you alright? I thought you said you could handle yourself. It was tougher than I expected. I had hoped they would ignore Sakura. Guy looked over and saw the girl hiding behind a few chairs. Ah, sorry. I thought it was just you and me. Kakashi looked over the Junin's shoulder and saw Naruto watching the stadium. Down below, Genma was locked in combat with Baki, the Suna Genin team leader. Sasuke was nowhere to be seen, nor were any of the other contestants still remaining. He began to fear the worst, that the enemy had gotten to them first. If it hadn't have been for Naruto, things might not have turned out well. Guy turned to Naruto, but the blonde's mind lay elsewhere. Nice work, Naruto-kun. Your manly youth burns brightly once again, protecting Kakashi. Why, if I had a medal I would. Guy, enough of that. Kakashi walked past her overbearing friend to stand near the railing. So, Sasuke had gone off in pursuit of Gaara. Alone, that wouldn't bode well for the Uchiha, regardless of the training they did. It was clear now the red head was important to Suna's war effort, and that made fighting him all the more dangerous. They would need to do more than organize a counterattack in the stadium if they wanted to help the village. Preventing Gaara from escaping seemed to be the task at hand. Sakura. The girl heard her sensei call out to her and watched the older ninja approach. Wake up, Arata, we'll need his help. While Sakura prepared to dispel the genjutsu affecting her teammate, Kakashi bit her thumb and began going through hand signs. It would be impossible for them to track down anyone in that chaos, so she would have to bring in an expert. She had just the dog in mind. Kuchios. Naruto and Guy observed Kakashi's summon reveal itself, a small dog with a blue vest and Konoha Hitai tied to its forehead. At the same time, Arata stirred from his sleep. He seemed to be quite irritated. Whether it was from being tricked or woken up was hard to say. What the hell? He looked around, seeing Sakura first. Pinky. What the hell's going? A fist slammed into his forehead and sent him flying back into the opposite wall. Idiot. I told you not to call me by that stupid name. Sakura shook her fist, looking so angry at her fellow genin it was almost comedic. Ah. He held his head in the bruising spot. Why do you have to be so? Arata. Naruto's deep voice called out to him. The blonde had his arms crossed, his face trying its best to retain a serious expression. Don't finish that sentence. There are bigger things you need to focus on. Oh yeah, he remembered how his vision dimmed after seeing a bunch of feathers, he must have fallen asleep. Urata, Sakura, listen up, Kakashi said, her voice had a sense of urgency to it. Sasuke has gone after Gaara, alone. The two genin looked surprised before they both settled on an appropriate emotion. They both knew who Gaara was and just how dangerous he could be, if the demonstration against Lee was anything to go by. Sakura was appropriately terrified that her crush had gone off alone and could be hurt. She didn't even want to think of any other possibilities. Sasuke. The girl muttered, concerned. Urata, on the other hand, clenched his fists in anger. There they were preaching about teamwork during the first and second exam and then Sasuke up and leaves them behind. What the hell kind of a teammate was he? Maybe they didn't get along so well in the academy because they were so different, but they were shinobi now. They were supposed to work together, because if they didn't it could be the difference between life or death. If Sasuke kept up with reckless actions like that, he might end up on the dead side. Not that Urata could say much to reckless actions, but still. Baka. What the hell was that guy thinking? Oi, both of you. Now isn't the time to think about pointless things. Naruto shouted at them, taking on the sudden role of a leader. If you want to do something useful for Sasuke and the village, listen up. Kakashi and Guy could barely hide their smiles. It wasn't often a chunin, especially a new one like Naruto, showed any kind of backbone when it came to leadership. The teamwork exercises Team 7 had participated in with him must have made him feel particularly attached to their well-being. It also meant he knew when they were listening and when they were wasting time. Thank you, Naruto, Kakashi said, her hand resting on his shoulder. She turned to her students who waited for orders. Hakun will guide you two to Sasuke, where you all will work together to fight Gaara. The dog nodded, his nose already locked on the scent. This is an A-rank mission, so act like it. Don't do anything stupid. Urata, I mean you. The tan boy scratched his cheek bashfully. Sure, he wasn't the most cautious genin in the world. He liked to take risks, it was in his blood. Living off the streets of Konoha with nothing but the clothes on your back did that to a person. Don't worry, Sensei, I'll keep an eye on him. Sakura said, a balled fist raised high in the air. Good, now. Kakashi looked at her Ninken and nodded. Hakun, go. On cue, Guy created a gaping hole in the wall behind them. Not wasting any time to gawk, the tracker dog and Haruno ran out into the village. Urata soon followed with a not-so-gentle push from Naruto. Now that the younger ninja were on the move and away from immediate harm, the three left turned back to the rest of the stadium. The fighting had slackened since the onset of the invasion, and it seemed as if Konoha was starting to turn things around. In the distance they could see Kurenai and Aoba finishing off the last of their enemies, but Asuma was out of sight. A slight tinge of concern crossed Naruto's mind, but he knew his brother was tough enough to handle the enemy. The fighting wasn't only in the stadium after all, and the rest of the village needed all the help it could get. We need to focus on cleaning up here, Kakashi said, her eyes seemed to dance around as it tried to count the enemies remaining. Look, Kakashi, enemy reinforcements. Soon a shinobi landed on the rooftop of the stadium as they too began to count the number of hostiles still alive. Well, let's give them a warm welcome. Naruto jumped onto the guardrail and began to go through hand signs. Kakashi-sensei, care to join in? She smirked and began going through her own seals, catching onto the blonde's idea. Futon. Datapa. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. As if it was right out of their nature training exercise, the student and mentor pulled off a perfect wind-fire combo. Naruto's gust of air was guided by his hands, leading it straight for the platoon of enemy shinobi. Just as the first wave hit them, the fire enveloped the attack and created a maelstrom inferno that burned the bodies to a crisp. Oh, nice combo. Guy gave them a thumbs up and iconic smile. When more enemies began to swarm them, it seemed they agreed with the sentiment. It was so nice that they needed to be stopped, immediately. Naruto revealed his trench knives and launched into the air, meeting the enemy halfway. Their weapons clashed and metal sparked, but the Odo shinobi only had one kunai to block with. The blonde was easily able to avoid their sloppy guard as the two tumbled in midair down to the arena floor. He cut a deep gash into his opponent's stomach. Goo! Naruto's adversary groaned in pain as the blonde oriented himself so that his feet were touching the enemy's chest. See ya! Naruto kicked off with all his might to send himself back into the air. The power behind his legs sent the already dying Odo Nin into the ground, creating a small crater from the impact. Kakashi and Guy on the other hand let the enemy come to them, throwing kunai at their vulnerable position in the air. A few went down, but most were able to land on their viewing platform and engage the two in close combat. Many of them discovered too late that it was they whom were at a disadvantage against Guy's strength and Kakashi's speed. Goken. The bowl-cut Junin sent a devastating punch to an enemy's jaw that sent them into the already battered stone wall. Guy leaned back and easily avoided an overextended kunai thrust, at the same time grabbing the enemy's collar. With great strength he threw the Odo Nin at his fellows, creating an impromptu bowling session. The entire enemy formation was sent flying, much to Guy's happiness. I think that, he paused for dramatic effect, his smile threatening to blind any who gaze upon it. Dot was a strike. Quit messing around, Guy. Kakashi growled as she held Asuna Shinobi in a headlock. With one quick movement of the arm, his neck was broken. She dropped the body to the floor and twisted around with lightning-fast speed, ducking underneath a wind attack. Kakashi sent a devastating kick to the enemy's stomach that sent them flying through the hole Guy made in the wall. Another one, a particularly large sound ninja, came barreling toward her with the intent to kill. Before she could even get into a guard stance, the man's eyes widened and he fell to his knees. In his back was a number of shuriken and kunai, and even farther behind him was Naruto with his hands in the snake seal. Must be his weapon manipulation technique, Kakashi thought, lowering her kunai for a moment. Naruto smiled at his teacher, reassuring her he was watching her back. He was surprised when she quickly brought up her kunai and threw it at him. It sailed over his head and some blood spilled on his back. He turned to see Asuna Ninja now toppling over, the knife stuck in his neck. That makes us even. Kakashi gave him a smile. For now at least. The three Konoha shinobi rallied together and watched as Kurenai and Aoba made it over to their side. The two Junin looked like they had it tough holding down their end of the stadium, cuts and soot littered their uniforms. Kurenai Sensei, where's Asuma? Naruto asked, grabbing her attention. He went after Shikamaru, who was apparently dragged after Sasuke by Shino. Speaking of whom, the Genjutsu mistress looked around for a moment. Kakashi, where are your students? I thought they were with you. I sent them after Sasuke to act as reinforcements, but I'm glad they'll have help. There is no telling what they might be going up against. Guy looked at Aoba with an inquisitive gaze. If anyone had information on the battle they didn't already know, it would be him. The Tokubetsu Junin noticed his look and tried to collect his thoughts. As far as I know, Jiraiya-sama is mounting the defense against the enemy summons to the west. There also seems to be an effective counterattack happening with the Ino-Shika Cho group leading the charge. No telling when help will get here though. Baki and Genma had already fallen back, their fight long since a stalemate. From what they could tell, they were the only shinobi still awake, or alive for that matter in the stadium outside of the Anbuin cage. Let's get to higher ground, perhaps we can get a better understanding of the situation. Guy suggested, to which the rest agreed. The Konoha shinobi leapt up onto the roof and got a better view of their village. More specifically, they got a better look at the damage. All around smoke and fire erupted from the buildings down below. Figures ran to and from the buildings, either there to help or harm. All the civilians should have been evacuated by now, and that meant they could take the enemy on full force. Off in the distance, they could see what looked like three large snakes fighting against an equally large toad. It seemed Jiraiya had already made an entrance. A faint rumbling turned their attention toward where the village ended and a vast forest began. It was in the general direction that Pakun and the rest had gone in, which immediately concerned Naruto and Kakashi. That was when they saw some sort of beige creature emerge from the trees and tower over the area. What the hell is that? Aoba asked out loud. Dunno, it isn't ours. Right. Kurenai was equally confused, she had never seen anything like it. Looks like sand. Guy muttered, holding his chin in thought. Gaara. Naruto's mind flashed and he realized that there was more to that genin than he had first thought. Does this mean ease? Like me? Kyuubi remained silent as his Jinchuriki tried to figure out the answer. So far, the blonde had demonstrated enough skill that the beast didn't try to interfere much with his affairs. On occasions when it knew the kid would have trouble, the fox would flood his system with chakra, but otherwise remained content to sit and watch. There was no better way for Naruto to learn than to figure things out for himself. Besides, it was entertaining to watch his human brain try to comprehend such simple things. That thing, he muttered, putting the pieces together. It means Sasuke and the others failed to stop Gaara. The older shinobi looked at him in surprise. How did he know that? It was like he actually knew what that thing was. Naruto, explain. Kakashi asked in an even tone. She had come to rely on his judgment in battle. He might have been a bit excitable and aggressive, but when it came to situations like that, Kakashi knew he had a good reason to say something. Gaara, I think he's a Jinchuriki like me. And that. He pointed to the large monstrosity as it smashed its tail into the ground. Is what his tailed beast looks like. Considering the Suna Genin's unique abilities and raw power, it was a possibility. Not only that, but it was hard to miss the familiar feeling of such a dark, negative chakra release. Those who had seen a tailed beast or had been in one's vicinity could easily recognize the killing intent, the literal pressure it put on them. This could get dangerous, Kurenai murmured, concern gripping her. Aoba and Guy were equally speechless as they tried to comprehend the situation. Only Naruto and Kakashi seemed to show any form of calm or preparedness. Kakashi. Naruto looked at her, worry creasing his brow. Urata and Sakura. They are in danger, along with the rest of them. We have to do something. It would be too irrational to just run off in an attempt to help without knowing all the facts. Before she could try to ease Naruto's conscience, the blonde made up his own mind. That was when she cursed his aggressively protective emotions. Naruto leapt from the rooftop and headed straight for the towering Shukaku, ignoring the shouts coming from behind. There was no way he could leave Team 7 and the others defenseless. With the techniques he had learned, there must have been something he could do. Naruto. Kakashi swore and leapt after him, but was forced to stop on a nearby rooftop as more Oto and Suna shinobi showed up. They effectively separated the two groups, leaving Naruto to fend for himself. Whatever help he planned to lend Sasuke and the others, it would have to be enough. It was Kakashi's duty to protect Naruto, and it only frustrated her more that she was being stopped by these obstacles. Gathering lightning chakra again, she sent the enemy a deadly glare as she readied her Sharingan. Out of my way. The two sides charged one another with the intent to kill. Their battle was just beginning, but Urata's was just finishing up. Oh. It wasn't long in their pursuit of Sasuke that Pakun told them they were being followed. Of course, the enemy wouldn't let them escape so easily. For a while they tried to outrun them, but the other group was large and well conditioned for pursuit tactics. If they kept going at the speed they were moving, Sakura and Urata would be overwhelmed. That was when he volunteered to stay behind. His teammate tried to protest, but he knew that if anyone had a chance of stopping them, it was himself. No offense to Sakura, but she wasn't cut out for combat. That had become apparent since the second exam, regardless of her ability to fend off the sound shinobi. Besides, Urata had a plan to go with his trump card. In an odd tactic, he began to litter the ground and surrounding area with his kunai and shuriken. After he had emptied his thigh and waist pouch of all the weapons, save for one kunai, he waited in the forest clearing. Sure enough, the Odo battalion took his challenge and 8 of them appeared just a few feet away. They took in the sights, baffled at the appearance of so much weaponry. Not just that, they couldn't see any obvious tactic he could have as none of the weapons seemed to be booby-trapped. Alright kid, looks like it's the end of the line for you. Urata smirked as he shrugged his shoulders. I think you guys are a little overconfident. You are outnumbered after all. They couldn't hold back their laughter. This genin made a good jokester. Good one. Next time you'll tell us Konoha's Kinjutsu. Urata slowly raised his hands above his head, smiling as he did so. Well, I don't know about any of that stuff. But let me show you a real trick. If they were paying any attention, the sound shinobi would have noticed the weapons were beginning to move on their own. They approached Urata. One revealed a kunai that he planned to drive deep into the kid. He didn't know why Suna wanted him dead, but apparently Orochimaru said the same thing. An order was an order. Time to die. The Odo shinobi was right in front of him, about ready to send the kunai straight into his skull. Guratsuki no Tetsubuyo. Having finally given a name to the technique, Urata decided to give it an appropriate christening. Blood stained the forest floor as the Odo shinobi found themselves impaled with dozens of iron projectiles. They fell, altogether, to the ground with an assortment of grunts of pain or exasperated sighs. That was what happened when you underestimated an enemy shinobi. Urata fell to his knees, his chakra almost completely drained. It was just like the time he fought Tenten and controlled her dozens and dozens of weapons, his chakra suffered greatly. There was little chance he could gather the strength to keep going and help Sakura, but he had to try. Going somewhere. Brat. The cold voice froze his entire body. There must have been another enemy shinobi, waiting in the distance in case something went wrong. Now that the genin had thoroughly exhausted himself, the ninja showed himself. He had his own weapon ready and was not about to let the kid try the same technique. So this is it, yeah. Urata wore a sad smile, trying to find something to regret so he could feel as cliché as possible. Well, yes, I can regret not getting to see Kakashi Sensei naked. I mean, come on. How Sasuke can just ignore that? Urata, get down. Snapped from his lecherous thoughts, the kid did as the commanding voice said and covered his head. Naruto appeared on top of the genin's back, arms tucked into his chest. With speed the enemy couldn't follow, he sent his arms flying out with the blades cutting deep into the Odo shinobi's chest. That was when they tried to retreat by leaping back. Ah, you bast. His eyes widened as Naruto's speed proved greater and the wind blades made a cutting motion for his neck. That was the last thing the enemy saw before his own head went flying, separated from its body. Naruto stored his weapons and ran back to check on Urata, who was hyperventilating in fear. Calm down, Sato. The battle's over. Why yeah, I know. Urata cursed himself. Trying to control his breathing was surprisingly difficult. Oi. You shouldn't worry about me. Sakura. And Sasuke are in trouble. He wheezed out, surprising Naruto with his selflessness. Yeah, I'll go save them as soon as you calm down. Naruto's hand rested comfortably on his back in an attempt to ease his tension. After a little while, Urata had gotten himself back under control. Naruto gave him instructions on where to fall back to before continuing on. They had little time to waste on pleasantries. Urata did wish him luck before he left. Knowing the monster that laid ahead, Naruto would need it. As it turned out, Naruto had more than just a bit of luck on his side. A few days later. Konohagakure. We have need of a leader right now, Jiraiya. If you won't do it, who will? Well, if you have to have a Sannin, I suppose I can get you one. It would be a boring mission, but seeing Tsunade may give him more research than he could handle. Besides, it was the least he could do after the third sacrificed himself in battle. If Jiraiya had taken the situation in Konoha a bit more seriously, there would have been a chance the entire conflict could have been avoided. At least, that was what he liked to tell himself. Tsunade. Koharu questioned with Homura by her side, looking equally curious. It was true she would be an invaluable asset to the village, but first she would have to be willing to return. Not only did her stubbornness play an issue, but no one knew where she was. Ever since the death of her loved ones, she had slowly lost confidence in the village until she finally gave up and left. A pitiful display by the council's opinion, but they couldn't very well stop such an influential and powerful kunoichi like Tsunade. After all the casualties we sustained, she's almost a necessity, right? Jiraiya asked, rhetorically. Well, I'll get her back for you. I was planning on leaving soon anyway. Homura deliberated with himself for a moment before looking at Jiraiya with a careful gaze. Very well, Jiraiya, but we will send an Anbu platoon to support the mission. It is of the utmost importance to the village it succeeds. That did not sound good, at all. A group of porcelain-masked babysitters, babysitting one of the Sannin of all people. What would it do to his reputation? If you asked someone else, they might say it couldn't be made worse. Ah, no thanks. He waved his hand in front of them, shaking his head. An idea formed in his head though, and with a conniving smirk he looked at the annoyed council. There was no way they could refuse him considering the favor he was doing them. There's one guy the first wouldn't mind taking along, if it's alright with you. The two elders waited there impatiently through his dramatic pause Jiraiya had created. They were glad that they did not have to deal with the Toad Sage when he was a child. He was already bad enough to drive them slowly senile. Naruto Uzumaki. What do you say? Their faces hardened, surprising the Sannin. If anything, he expected them to be happy to get rid of the kid. I'm afraid we will have to deny that request. Jiraiya practically flopped over in distress. Confusion laced his features as Koharu delivered the statement with nothing but truth. Why? Was all he could think to blurt out. Homura responded for his partner as he hoped to finish this silly conversation as soon as possible. Naruto Uzumaki has proven to be a capable chunin and served the village well during the invasion. Surely you heard of his actions in the stadium and the defeat of Suna no Gara, the Ikibi container. Jiraiya nodded. Hell, he probably saw all of it from the top of his summon. Koharu nodded. The Jinchuriki was becoming a powerful shinobi. He would be an effective deterrent to war in Konoha's weakened state, which would require him to stay inside the village. There was also the chance of him being harmed if taken out of the village, which was something they could not allow to happen. Ironically, the Kyuubi was the Leaf's guardian in harsh times like those. You have got to be kidding me. Jiraiya held his head in his hand, trying to figure out a way to talk them out of it. So, we will arrange the Anbu platoon to meet with you within the hour. Don't waste any time. Well, that conversation ended quickly. Oh, Konohagakure. Will of Fire Monument. Oh. Naruto and dozens of other shinobi attended the Sandame's funeral. All of them wore dark clothing of some sort, their heads bowed in respect. The eyes of those there could not bear to look upon the Sandame's face, for they knew if they did, tears would be inescapable. The sky filled with dark clouds as it began to rain. It seemed even Kami wept for the village hidden in the leaves. Asuma and Kurenai stood on either side of Naruto in the front row of shinobi. One by one, they all went up and placed a white lily on his memorial. It was heartbreaking to think that the man so many had looked up to as not just a leader, but a father or grandfather, was dead. Yes, he died protecting the village and would be remembered forever with honor, but what of the feelings he left behind? Naruto couldn't take it and began to quietly sob as tears fell from his eyes. Some noticed and all were sympathetic as they could barely hold back the same feeling. Asuma stood there, resolute. He was putting on a strong act, but for those close to him, they knew he was close to breaking. In front him, with his hands on either shoulder, stood Konohamaru. The boy had been crying before they had even arrived and found little solace in his uncle's arms. Kurenai saw her little brother begin to cry and motioned to comfort him. It was already difficult enough for her to bear. What Naruto must have been going through was surely worse. The only man to take me in, and now. And now he's dead. My grandfather is dead. What the hell did I train so hard for? He felt like giving up. Hiruzen had always been there, watching him from a distance. Whenever he would falter, Hiruzen would be there to get him back on his feet with a word of advice. If there was ever indecision in Naruto's actions, Hiruzen would have been there to guide him. Now it was all gone. His fists balled in pain. It would be difficult to ignore this pain in his chest. It was the hardest pain to mend after all. An arm wrapped around his shoulders, pulling him backward. He opened his eyes to see a flash of silver and then nothing but black as his face was enveloped in cloth. Kakashi's left arm held Naruto close to her body while her right hand held the back of his head. She was unable to watch him cry alone, her face softening with a familiar sense of sympathy. After all, it was impossible for her to forget all those that had passed before her. All the mistakes she made that led to those close to her dying, one by one. If she could help it, she wouldn't let Naruto fall that far. Not alone. It's okay, Naruto, she whispered into his ear, taking on an almost motherly tone. The Sandames will live on. In all of us. Naruto's arms wrapped around Kakashi's slender frame, trying to find comfort in her warmth. The pain in his chest slowly began to recede as the two remained connected. Was this why the third was so adamant they work together? Did he know something like this would happen? The sun began to emerge, peeking over the Hokage monument. Kakashi looked up and smiled. This is his legacy. Oh. It was an amazing feeling. Naruto smiled, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. I never thought Kakashi-sensei would do that. She really made me feel better. What was it though? I just felt so comfortable. Like I could stay there forever. Naruto shook his head clear. He stood in front of the Will of Fire monument, in which the village's Hokage were buried. In front of him the picture of the third stared resolutely back at him. It was as if the conversation was the most important thing in the world. Well, it meant a lot to Naruto to get the story off of his chest. I just wanted to say thanks. For everything. Naruto bowed before producing a big smile. I won't let you down, I promise. With that, Naruto turned on his heel and left the memorial. As much as he would have liked to spend the day there, he was sure there was something to do around the village. He had been working hard along with many other shinobi to rebuild, though their numbers had slackened. Konoha had missions to fulfill after all, and they couldn't afford to refuse any of them. That said, Naruto seemed to be exempt from any kind of work outside of the walls. It was an odd thing, especially for a Chunin. He walked the village streets and passed many civilians busying about. They were now the primary workforce in rebuilding that which was destroyed. Homes were prioritized first, then the merchant district and all that remained after. The shinobi had ensured in the opening few days of rebuilding that the military infrastructure was quickly rebuilt, which included the demolished West Wall. It felt like there was more he could be doing, but everywhere he looked it seemed everything was fixed. The progress was astounding. To Naruto, that said something about the resilience of the Leaf, not just the shinobi but the people too. From this realization came a proud smile that adorned his face as he walked to an unknown destination. The third had left behind a legacy to be proud of, he thought. His good mood came crashing down when a deep, familiar voice addressed him from behind. Oi, what the hell are you smiling about? Nico was standing there, hands in pocket. He was actually smiling, of all things. Naruto didn't share his sentiments, scowling. Hopefully the Junin would get the hint to leave him alone, but it seemed he had other plans. I'm not here to fight if that's what you were thinking. Naruto's guard failed to relax, which made the man frown. Wasn't it obvious appearing before the blonde was hard enough? It would have been easier to just fight the kid, he was starting to think. Listen. He combed his pink hair nervously, eyes staring away from Naruto. I wanted to apologize for what I said before. Naruto's eyes widened, he was not expecting that. What you did during the attack, that was something no one else could have pulled off. Nico admitted, his gray eyes filled with envy and a tinge of respect. That was something a true Konoha shinobi would do. Sorry for saying the things I did. He informally bowed his head in apology, it was the most he could get himself to do. Regretful or not, Nico still had some pride in his older age. Naruto was no longer frowning, his face neutral. It wouldn't be right to continue the conflict after Nico's apology. Something told him that he was telling the truth. I appreciate you saying this. But do me a favor. Nico looked at the blonde, listening. Apologize to Kakashi, not me. The older man frowned but nodded. He had disrespected Kakashi with his conduct and the least he could do was repay Naruto by following through. Before they could part, an exasperated Ebisu came down from one of the rooftops in between them. It was as if he had seen a ghost with how fast he must have been running. The two other shinobi looked at him with concern, but he delayed no longer in telling them his message. The village has been infiltrated. Their eyes widened and suddenly their guard went up. Kakashi and the others fought them off, but she's in the hospital. Naruto was frozen, unable to think or say anything. Kakashi, in the hospital. Who had the power to do that? Better yet, where were they so he could kill them himself? Infiltrated. What the hell are the Anbu doing? Nico shouted in anger with Ebisu turning to him. Nico, I came to find you and all the other Junin scattered around. There is an emergency meeting being held in the lounge, we are trying to decide how to proceed. The pink-headed man nodded and, before leaving, gave a comforting nod to Naruto. It must have been the toughest on him. Naruto. Ebisu turned to him, pressing his glasses back up the bridge of his nose. The elders have asked that you remain on standby until further notice. You might be part of the counter-response unit. Unfortunately, the village's Junin and Chunin were in short supply. Naruto wasn't the strongest ninja in the village, but he was respectable enough for them to consider him for the mission. Not only that, but they had but the faintest idea of who the attackers were or what their organization wanted, and by putting Naruto in the group, they might confirm many suspicions. Understood. I'll be at the hospital. The Tokubetsu Junin nodded before taking off to find more available shinobi. He wasn't sure what he was going to do, but there was no way he could leave Kakashi alone. Not after the third's death, not after the tears he shed. Not another precious person would be taken from him. Konohagakure. Hospital. Kakashi. The medical ninja attending to the comatose woman turned around in surprise. Naruto burst into the room and saw the sorry state the Junin was in. Concern washed over him as he rushed to her bedside, giving the medics little space to maneuver. Luckily, they had done most of what could be done already and were about ready to leave. It looked like Naruto needed some alone time after all. What happened to her? He asked, his voice quickly losing emotion. Inside, his body felt like it was being twisted around a knife. Severe mental exhaustion, most likely from sort of torture technique that affected the mind. Torture. The word sat on Naruto's tongue like poison. Will she? He couldn't even finish a damn sentence, he was so scared. We have done all we can for her. It is up to her mind to rest and recover on its own. That meant there was no telling how long she would be out. Naruto's fists wanted something to punch, but he immediately relaxed as the Junin shifted in her deep sleep. To calm down, he chose to focus his eyes on her. Past the condition she was in, just Kakashi as she was. Her vest had been removed, leaving her in the tight blue shirt she usually wore. The silver hair he had been so entranced by lay flat and scattered on the pillow beneath her head. Kakashi's left eye, usually covered by her Hitai-8, was revealed but closed. The arms that had held him so tightly now lay limp at her sides. Kakashi. Naruto sat down in a nearby chair, just a few inches from her side. Hesitantly, he took her hand in both of his and was shocked at how cold she was. There was no way she was gone, right? The monitors nearby reminded him she was still alive, much to his relief. Naruto couldn't think of anything to say, so he continued to sit there for what felt like hours. The uncomfortable silence was only broken by the consistent beep of the medical equipment and the soft breathing that came from the two occupants. Finally, Naruto sighed and looked down at the ground to avoid watching her. It was like something was mocking him for his weakness every time he looked at her face. This was torture, but he wouldn't leave. No, he couldn't leave her side. I'm sorry, Kakashi. He bit his lip, enough to make it bleed. The door opened, but he didn't bother to look who it was. Multiple footsteps told him it must have been important, but he couldn't summon the energy to check the new arrivals. It was like Kakashi's touch was a sweet poison, sapping him of strength. Naruto-kun, Guy shouted, a few feet from the bed. At his flanks were Asuma and Kurenai, and both looked wounded in some way. The Sarutobi's left arm was recently bandaged and Kurenai had a slight limp. It was enough to bring at least a little of Naruto's attention away from the bedridden Junin. What? He asked, still finding it hard to articulate words. We've been ordered to pursue Kakashi's attackers. They made sure we had to include you, so come on. The taijutsu master was surprisingly serious, his chipper attitude non-existent. That was alright though, because Naruto had finally found strength enough to stand. He would pay them back for what they did to Kakashi. It seemed the heavens were smiling upon him by gifting him this chance. Not just that, Sasuke Uchiha has left the village in pursuit of one of them. We need to make sure he remains out of harm's way. Kurenai added after receiving the hasty briefing. Naruto joined them by the door, surprise registering on his face. Sasuke had gone after them. Why? Do we know who these guys are? Naruto asked, and the Junin's faces seemed to darken. Kisame Hoshigaki of the Mist. Asuma announced, his frown turning into a scowl with the next name. And Itachi Uchiha of the Leaf. Both are nuke nin and highly dangerous. If Naruto had been surprised before, he was shocked now. Itachi Uchiha, the infamous Uchiha that left the village shortly after the massacre of his clan. Sasuke was his little brother, and it seemed there was some seriously bad blood between them. An odd sense of custodial responsibility came over Naruto, his eyes turning back to Kakashi. Whether he liked it or not, Naruto was part of Team 7. He had a duty to watch over them when Kakashi wasn't around. If Sasuke was in danger, that meant he would have to do something about that. How could he face the Junin if he failed to protect one of her students? He shuddered at the thought. Come on, we need to move fast if we want to reach them in time. Guy urged, indicating he follow them. The Junin took off down the hallway, leaving Naruto alone in the room. He laid one last look upon Kakashi, the woman who had given him strength in his worst times of need. It was Kakashi that had put all her faith in him when others would have abandoned him. Thanks to her, he was a powerful shinobi worthy of the Third's legacy. I'll be back soon, Kakashi. His eyes hardened. Just rest for a while and let me take a bit of your burden. Naruto ran out of the room in an attempt to catch up with the others. He wasn't about to let Itachi and Kisame get away with what they did to her. They would have to pay a heavy price, whether it be now or some time in the future. He would have revenge.